spending a decade living a separate life with her husband to pluck up the courage to get divorced.
When you're feeling a dark place and you can't see any light, really, or happiness, and you feel low and it's gloomy.
For years, Ruth Langsford and Eamonn Holmes looked like that couple everyone believed in. The kind people pointed to and said, "See, that's how it's supposed to be." They laughed together on TV, moved like best friends, and gave off this unbreakable energy. But behind all that, things were nowhere near as perfect as they seemed. Now at 66, Ruth is finally pulling the curtain back and speaking on what really went down, and why their 14-year marriage came crashing to an end. And it's not just a simple story either. There was tension, distance, and moments she kept to herself for years. From feeling completely alone in her own home to discovering things she never saw coming, she's now ready to put her truth out there. So what exactly pushed her to speak now after staying quiet for so long? And what was really happening when the cameras weren't rolling? Let's get into it. Before all the headlines and before the very public breakdown of her marriage, Ruth Langsford was just a regular girl with big dreams, holding on to the idea that one day she'd build something for herself. Nothing flashy, nothing handed to her. Just quiet ambition growing stronger over time. Born in Singapore in 1960, her story really started to take shape later in London, where she attended Greycoat Hospital School. Back then, there were no signs pointing to a future in the spotlight. No big moments, no early fame. But something inside her kept pushing forward anyway. Her early days in television weren't glamorous at all. She started out as a continuity announcer and newscaster with ITV's regional station Television Southwest in Plymouth. It was steady, routine work, the kind that builds discipline and thick skin, but even then, she wasn't someone who stayed still for long. Then everything shifted in 1993 when West Country Television took over, and just like that, the station shut down. No warning, no clear next step, just uncertainty. Ruth, along with fellow announcer Ian Sterling, suddenly had to figure out what came next without any guarantees. But she didn't stay stuck in that moment. By 1999, she stepped into a completely different space, joining Loose Women as a regular panelist. This wasn't just reading scripts anymore. This was personality, opinions, real conversations. It was raw, exposed, and way more personal, and she handled it like she belonged there. She stayed until 2002, stepped away, and then came back stronger years later. First as a stand-in anchor in 2010, then fully reclaiming her seat in 2014. This time, it wasn't just another role, it was power. Sitting at the center of discussions alongside names like Jane Moore, Charlene White, Christine Lampard, and Kay Adams, she had officially locked in her place. But while all of that was building, something even bigger was quietly unfolding at the same time. Back in 2000, Ruth started appearing on This Morning as a guest presenter. At first it was occasional, nothing permanent. But by 2006, she had secured a regular spot, co-hosting alongside Philip Schofield and becoming a familiar face viewers trusted. Then came the moment that changed everything. Later that same year, Eamonn Holmes joined her as a Friday co-host. And from the outside, it looked like pure magic. Easy chemistry, natural conversations, real laughs. It felt effortless. People believed in it instantly. But what started as a professional partnership slowly started crossing into something deeper, more personal, and eventually more complicated than anyone realized. Still, Ruth kept building her career like nothing could shake her. She hosted multiple shows, from TV Travel Shop to The Great British Garden Show, and even narrated projects like Zoo Story. There was always something new, always another opportunity. She kept moving, kept growing, never slowing down. By 2010, she expanded even more, appearing on GMTV with Lorraine, stepping into reality TV with Marco's Kitchen Burnout, and then taking on Born to Shine in 2011. It wasn't just about staying visible, it was about proving she could handle anything thrown her way. Then came 2014, a year where everything seemed perfectly aligned. She and Eamonn co-hosted Gift Wrapped, presenting themselves as a flawless duo both on and off screen. By 2015, they were leading How the Other Half Lives, showing viewers a world of luxury and high-end lifestyles. From the outside, it looked like the dream was complete. Career success, strong partnership, everything moving together in sync. But behind all of that, Ruth was quietly building something just for herself. In 2017, she launched her fashion line on QVC, Ruth Langsford's Fashion Edit. This wasn't shared, this wasn't tied to anyone else, it was hers. That same year, she stepped onto the Strictly Come Dancing stage, partnered with Anton Dubeka. It pushed her out of her comfort zone in a whole new way. She didn't win, leaving in November, but that wasn't the point. It showed independence. It showed strength outside of her TV identity and outside of her relationship, and she didn't slow down. From co-presenting Do the Right Thing with Eamonn in 2018 to hosting Lose a Stone in 4 weeks with Amir Khan in 2019 and 2020, Ruth stayed consistent, visible, and reliable. She expanded into radio on BBC London 94.9, became a brand ambassador, and connected with audiences through columns that felt more personal and real. On paper, everything looked perfectly built. A career carefully stacked piece by piece, nothing out of place, nothing missing. But when you really follow the timeline, when you look closer, something else starts to show. A career rising higher and higher, a relationship quietly shifting, and underneath it all, a story that wasn't as simple as it looked. Because while Ruth Langsford was building this steady, successful life in public, something very different was unfolding behind closed doors. And eventually, it couldn't stay hidden anymore. In 2024, Ruth Langsford and Eamonn Holmes officially announced their divorce after 14 years of marriage. And just like that, everything people thought they knew flipped upside down. It hit harder because of how solid they looked for so long. No warning signs on screen, no obvious cracks, just a sudden ending that left people questioning everything they thought they saw. From the outside, everything about Ruth Langsford and Eamonn Holmes looked effortless and real at the same time. Their chemistry flowed naturally, the laughter never seemed forced, and nothing about them suggested that behind closed doors, things might be slowly shifting. But long before the headlines took over, before statements were released and everything began to unravel, there was a period where their connection felt genuine and deeply rooted. They weren't always the couple people questioned. They were once the couple people believed in without hesitation. They first met back in 1997 through their mutual friend, television presenter Sally Mean, and from the very beginning, there was a quiet but undeniable connection between them. It wasn't rushed or overly public, especially because Eamonn had only separated from his first wife, Gabrielle Holmes, just 2 years prior. That history mattered, and instead of pushing things forward too quickly, they chose to keep their relationship private. Not out of secrecy, but out of respect for the situation and everyone involved. For Ruth, that decision spoke volumes about his character, showing her the kind of man he was and the values he carried. Instead of creating distance, it actually pulled her closer and made her feelings for him even stronger. By the time they made their relationship public 2 years later, things had already grown into something stable and meaningful. In 2002, they welcomed their son, Jack Holmes, marking a new chapter in their lives together. Even that moment came with a personal detail that stayed behind the scenes. Ruth later shared that she had discovered she was pregnant just before attending her godson Charlie's christening. It was news she held close, choosing to tell her best friend first because Eamonn was away at the time. It's one of those quiet moments that never reaches the public eye, yet says everything about the reality of their relationship during that time. As their personal life became more settled, their professional paths began to merge in a way that would define how the public saw them. By 2006, 9 years into their relationship, they started co-hosting the Friday edition of This Morning together. Ruth had already established herself on the show, but bringing Eamonn into that space shifted the dynamic completely. Their relationship was no longer just personal. It was now something audiences watched unfold in real time. While it appeared smooth and effortless on screen, Ruth later admitted that working with your partner came with its own challenges, even if they managed to make it work most of the time. From that point on, they became a familiar duo across multiple television projects, reinforcing the image of a couple who could balance both love and work. They co-presented shows like Gift Wrapped, How the Other Half Lives, and Lose a Stone in 4 weeks, while also leaning into their real-life relationship through programs such as Eamonn and Ruth's 7-Year Itch and Do the Right Thing. Their presence became consistent, almost expected, and at one point, Eamonn even joked about how television would struggle without them, highlighting just how embedded they had become in viewers' routines. Over time, that long-standing partnership naturally evolved into marriage. 13 years after they first met, and 5 years after his divorce was finalized, they tied the knot at Elvetham Hall in Hampshire. It felt like a continuation of something that had already proven its strength. Soon after, they settled into a 6-bedroom home in Weybridge, creating a life that, from the outside, appeared stable, established, and complete. Ruth often spoke about their relationship with a sense of quiet confidence, describing how Eamonn could joke with her one moment and show deep thoughtfulness the next. Even during her time on Strictly Come Dancing, when she admitted she was giving him very little attention, she still believed he understood. That sense of mutual understanding was, in her mind, the foundation that kept everything working. However, relationships don't always remain the same as they were in the beginning. By 2020, subtle changes had already started to appear, even if they weren't immediately obvious to the public. In November of that year, they were removed from their roles on This Morning and replaced by Alison Hammond and Dermot O'Leary. While it was presented as a professional decision, reports suggested that the situation was difficult for them to accept. From that moment, their paths began to shift. Ruth remained with ITV, continuing her role on Loose Women, while Eamonn moved in a different direction, joining GB News to host his own show. The balance they had maintained for years slowly began to change. Then, in May 2024, the confirmation came. Their spokesperson announced that the marriage had come to an end and that they were in the process of divorcing. The statement itself was brief and composed, but it hinted at deeper reasons behind the split. Reports pointed to their demanding work schedules, suggesting that over time, their commitments had taken them in separate directions. What may have started as small distances gradually grew into something more permanent, until the connection they once had no longer felt the same. Even in the middle of such a significant change, there was an effort to handle everything with respect. They expressed a desire to remain on good terms and to approach the situation with the same calm and composure that had defined their public image for years. An official statement was expected to bring closure, but when looking at the full timeline of their relationship, it becomes clear that this wasn't the result of a single moment. Instead, it was something that evolved quietly over time, until the reality behind the scenes no longer matched the image people had believed in. At the same time, another layer of pressure had been building within their personal lives. Over the years, Eamonn had spoken openly about his health struggles, and throughout it all, Ruth remained a constant presence by his side. She supported him daily, helping him navigate a situation that became increasingly difficult. By 2021, he was dealing with chronic back pain caused by 3 slipped discs, a condition that significantly impacted his quality of life. Around the same time, he also suffered a dislocated pelvis, adding further complications to his recovery. Surgery followed, but the results were not as straightforward as expected. His first spinal operation did not lead to the improvement they had hoped for, and instead, recovery became more complex. In 2022, he underwent another surgery, this time for a shoulder injury, and by 2023, a third operation was required. Each procedure brought new challenges, and over time, his day-to-day reality changed dramatically. He later shared that he had been relying heavily on a wheelchair, describing the experience as extremely difficult and something he had been dealing with continuously for nearly 2 years. Life had become far more complicated than it once was, adding yet another layer to an already evolving situation. As time went on, Eamonn Holmes began opening up about just how much his daily life had changed. He explained that even the simplest tasks were no longer easy, needing help just to get out of a chair, while carers stayed with him throughout the day, assisting with routines most people never even think about. Getting dressed in the morning, undressing at night, and even preparing meals had all become things he could no longer manage alone. It was a level of dependency that shifted everything, changing not just his physical reality, but the way he moved through each day. Even in that, he tried to hold on to some kind of structure. He shared that once he was seated, he could still function, still work, and still feel like himself to a certain extent. That small sense of independence meant everything, especially as so much else had changed around him. And through all of this, in the background of hospital visits, long recoveries, frustration, and those quiet moments no one else ever saw, Ruth Langsford remained present. She was there through the appointments, the setbacks, and the emotional weight of it all, which is exactly why what happened next carried such a heavy impact. In May 2024, they confirmed their split, bringing an end to a relationship that had lasted nearly 3 decades. For Ruth, this wasn't something she had expected. She admitted that from her perspective, she believed she was in a happy marriage, and that belief made everything far more difficult to process. It left her questioning whether she had missed something along the way, whether she had been too focused elsewhere, or whether there were signs she hadn't recognized at the time. Even with those questions, she made it clear she wasn't focused on assigning blame. Still, the emotional impact was undeniable. She spoke about how unprepared she felt in the beginning and how it left her feeling shaken and deeply affected. It wasn't only about heartbreak, but also about the loss of a future she had quietly imagined for herself over the years. There had been a version of her life she believed she was building, and suddenly, that version no longer existed. While she was trying to come to terms with that reality, things outside were already moving forward. Not long after the separation became public, Eamonn entered a new relationship with Katie Alexander. The timing drew attention, coming only months after the breakup was confirmed, and added another layer to a situation that already felt difficult to understand from the outside. Soon after, more details began to surface, and this is where the situation became even more complicated. Reports claimed that the breakdown of their marriage may have been triggered by something Ruth had not expected. It was said that she overheard Eamonn on the phone having what was described as a close and personal conversation with another woman, believing he was alone at home. However, Ruth was still in the house, hearing everything unfold in real time, which turned that moment into something impossible to ignore. That experience led to a confrontation, and what followed was not just a simple disagreement, but a moment that affected both of them deeply. Shortly after, it was reported that she discovered messages on his laptop, adding another layer to what she had already heard. At that point, it was no longer about a single moment, but about a broader situation that began to take shape in front of her. For Ruth, that realization was especially difficult, considering the support she had been providing throughout his health struggles. The timing and circumstances made everything feel heavier, and from that point forward, the relationship did not recover. The marriage, already under strain, continued for a short period, but it never regained its stability. That discovery ultimately became the turning point, the moment where everything shifted. It led to the announcement the public would later see, even though the statement itself was brief and composed, offering no detail about what had actually happened behind the scenes. It simply confirmed that the marriage was over and that they were moving forward with a divorce. Since then, Ruth has been focused on rebuilding her life step by step. She has been open about the fact that she is not ready to begin a new relationship and that she has not fully healed from what she experienced. At the same time, she has reached a level of acceptance, understanding that the marriage has ended and choosing to move forward rather than remain in that moment. She has spoken about how relationship breakdowns are never easy, whether in marriage or friendship, but at some point, a decision has to be made about how to respond. Either it becomes something that takes over completely, or there is a way to keep moving forward, even if that process is slow. Nearly 2 years after the separation, Ruth has chosen to speak more openly, sharing her experience through her book, Feeling Fabulous. Through that, the story people once thought they understood is beginning to shift, revealing a deeper and more emotional reality behind the composed image she maintained publicly at the time. In her memoir, she described just how deeply the breakup affected her in the early stages. The sadness was not something distant, but something that felt overwhelming. After more than 2 decades together, building a life, sharing routines, and imagining a future that felt certain, losing that does not feel like a simple ending. It creates a sense that everything once stable has suddenly become uncertain. She admitted that she always believed she and Eamonn would remain together long-term, and facing a different reality forced her into a position she had not prepared for. Life began to feel unfamiliar, and the uncertainty about what would come next did not pass quickly. She described herself as deeply affected in the beginning, struggling to process what felt like an unexpected ending. From her perspective, it came as a shock, which made the situation harder to understand. She questioned whether she had missed signs or failed to notice changes as they were happening. But even during those moments, she tried not to focus on blame. What remained was the emotional weight of the situation. She spoke about feeling broken, not only emotionally, but also in the loss of the future she had envisioned. That loss did not stay in the past, but carried into the present, forcing her to reconsider what her life would look like moving forward. The situation was made more difficult by the fact that it unfolded publicly. She admitted that dealing with something so personal while facing constant opinions and speculation added another layer of pressure. Returning to this morning, a place filled with shared memories, only made the experience feel more surreal. During that time, she turned to therapy, not just for comfort, but for clarity. She explained that while friends naturally supported her, therapy offered something different. It provided a space where she could reflect, be challenged, and better understand her own emotions without judgment. Over time, that process helped her begin to see a path forward, even if it was not clear at first. She admitted that there were moments when she felt overwhelmed and uncertain about whether things would improve, but gradually she began to understand that rebuilding a sense of happiness often requires effort and time. Part of that process also meant facing difficult truths. In her memoir, she acknowledged discovering that Eamonn had been having private conversations with other women. She did not present it as a single defining moment, but she did not minimize its impact either. It contributed to the confusion and made the situation harder to process. She emphasized that the end of the relationship was not caused by one single event, but by a combination of factors that developed over time. Ending such a long relationship involves more than emotional adjustment. It also requires time to process mentally and understand what has changed. There were moments when she found herself questioning the future, imagining life alone and trying to understand what it would look like. Over time, however, something shifted. Experience and perspective helped her find some stability again, allowing her to see that while the situation was painful, it would not define her entirely. As she reflected further, she also spoke about differences that had existed within the relationship. At one point, she had considered having another child after their son, Jack Holmes, but Eamonn, already a father of 3, did not share the same perspective. It was not a major conflict at the time, but looking back, it became one of those moments that highlighted how their paths were not always fully aligned. While Ruth has chosen to speak more openly, that decision has not gone unnoticed. Reports suggest that Eamonn is not entirely comfortable with how the narrative is developing publicly, feeling that his perspective has not been fully represented. There is a sense that he believes more could be said and that the situation is more complex than it appears. Up to this point, he has largely remained silent, avoiding public back-and-forth responses. However, that silence is beginning to feel more strained as public reactions continue to grow. From his point of view, the end of a marriage is rarely the result of one person alone. At the same time, their lives have clearly moved in different directions. Not long after the separation, he entered a new relationship with Katie Alexander, and it became public quickly. They were seen together openly, moving forward, even as his health challenges continued to shape his daily life. Ruth, on the other hand, has taken a more gradual approach. She has remained single, choosing not to rush into anything new, and instead focusing on her own recovery. She has said that while she has not ruled out love or marriage in the future, she is not actively searching for it at this stage. When she speaks about it, there is a level of honesty in acknowledging that the idea of becoming close to someone again brings a degree of uncertainty. It is something she is still working through in her own time. At one point, she saw Eamonn as her lifelong partner, the person she expected to grow old with. Looking back now, that realization carries a quiet weight, not only because of what was lost, but because of how different things turned out from what she had once imagined. Now, the story remains in a place that feels unresolved. Ruth has begun sharing her side, while Eamonn continues to remain mostly silent, at least for now. One perspective is being expressed openly, while the other has yet to fully respond. Because of that, it does not feel like a story that has reached its conclusion. Instead, it feels like something still developing, with details that have yet to fully align and emotions that have not completely settled. And if this is only one side beginning to speak, then the real tension may not be in what has already been revealed, but in what could still come forward next.